As your models grow in complexity, there will come a point when the on-screen performance is degraded. And you can see this a little bit here in this model where as I pan and orbit, the smoothness is compromised. It's kind of jerky or jumpy. And if I switch between scenes, it's not really very smooth. It's more like a stuttery slideshow. This is happening because there are too many edges and faces in this model for my graphics card to handle. Of course, I could go out and purchase a more expensive graphics card, but I'd like to show you some techniques that will help you get the most out of your existing hardware. The first tip is to use components rather than groups for repetitive elements. If you look closely, you'll see that there's the same tree here, 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 and so on. This is actually a single component definition. So SketchUp only has to remember the number of edges here one time. And then it has to remember the different places to locate that component. That's far more efficient than remembering a unique set of edges each and every time. So simply by using components, you're saving a lot of memory in the graphics card, and you're making your file size smaller. The second tip is to keep a close eye on the number of segments in your curves, or you can quickly blow your polygon budget for the entire model. For example, I'll draw two circles here on the ground. One will have 12 segments, and the other will have 36. Now, if I were only modeling a circle, the 36 segment circle looks better because the edges are smaller and it has more of a smooth appearance. But if I'm going to go beyond just the circle and turn it into a three-dimensional object, that's where I can quickly blow my budget. So for example, I'm going to select these circles and rotate them up 90 degrees. And then I'll draw an arc from roughly the center of each one over here someplace. I'll pre-select the path, press F, and click on the face to create a three-dimensional object. This actually greatly magnifies the number of faces that we have. We can actually measure that in statistics. Let me undo, go into Model Info, Statistics, and I can see the number of edges and faces that are currently in the model. If I go ahead and add something here, we go from 89,000 to just over 90,000, so that's like 1,000 edges that we've just added. Over here, we have the same type of thing. I'm going to pre-select the path, press F, and then click on the face. But we only added a few hundred, and the objects look just about the same. The reason for this is the surfaces are smoothed, so it gives you the illusion of curvature without having to pay for all of the additional edges and faces. Another classic example of this phenomenon occurs with handrails. People often create nice, smooth cross-sectional profiles for their handrails, and then when they use the Follow Me tool to create a complex path, it blows the polygon budget through the roof. A much better approach is to keep it very chunky in profile, and when you go ahead and extrude that object out, it will have fewer faces and edges, but it will still look good. My third tip is to purge unused items from your SketchUp file. You've already seen how you can purge unused components in the Components window, and unused layers from the Layers window. Well, right here in Statistics, there's this very convenient button that purges all unused components, layers, and materials from the model. I'll click on that, and we got rid of some information here that we're not even using. This will make the model more efficient and give the file a smaller size. There's also this Fix Problems button right here. And I wish more programs had this type of a button, but basically what it does is it tries to correct any internal issues that the file has. And all 3D programs eventually do develop these kinds of bugs. I'll click Fix Problems and it's going to do a validity check and tell me if there are any problems and fix them if there are. There's also a preference for that, located right here. You can have SketchUp automatically do a validity check and actually automatically fix the problems when they're found. This works most of the time. Problems don't develop very often, but when they do, come in here and try it. I have had files where this did not work and the file became unusable. So for that reason, I recommend saving your file periodically under different numerical extensions like Project 01, Project 02, and so on. My fourth tip is to manage levels of detail with placeholding components. Take this tree over across the river, for example. It's a three-dimensional representation, and so it has lots of faces and edges in it. This one tree might be responsible for a lot of the slowdown that I'm experiencing with the navigation. One thing we can do is represent that tree in a simpler way. I'll do that by drawing a polygon at the base of the tree trunk, and I'll make it approximately the size of the tree's canopy, and then push-pull it up. Triple-click to select All Connected, and press G to make it a component. I'll call this Tree for lack of a better name. And then I'll set the component axes. I'll go into X-ray mode so I can see the approximate center. I'll click there, and just set in the axes. I'm going to keep them the same orientation as the original axes. Then I'll just click Create, get out of X-ray mode, and then delete the component. Open the Components window, and track down this component. It's this tree deciduous component right here. Right-click and choose Select Instances, which will select all of the trees like this in the model. Then I'll go up here and locate the tree that I just created. I'll right-click on it and choose Replace Selected. So now the tree is represented by this low poly object. Now I can go ahead and keep working, and the graphical performance should be improved. Later on, when I'm ready to make a rendering, I can go ahead and come down here with this object selected, right-click on the tree, and choose Replace Selected to get the high poly representation back. An alternative, more global approach is to have both components coincident at the same time, and then use layers to toggle their visibility. I'll open the Layers window and create a low poly layer and a high poly layer. I'm going to open Entity Info by pressing Command I, and I'll place this low poly object on the low poly layer. Let me just turn that layer off, and then I'll select this tree and place it on the high poly layer. Now I can go ahead and work in low poly mode, and I could do this to all of my components. And then when I'm ready to look at the high poly trees, I can just toggle the layers and get them all back globally. My fifth and final efficiency tip has to do with texture maps. Let's go into Model Info and click on Rendering. There's only one option here that has to do with anti-aliased textures, which means when this is checked, SketchUp will try to smooth out any jagged pixels that appear in your textures. This tree over here is a photographic component that represents the foliage with this image. If I uncheck this, it doesn't look quite as good, but this is going to dramatically increase the performance. Another thing you can keep in mind is that SketchUp won't display textures that are larger than 1024 by 1024 pixels on the screen, so there's really no benefit in using texture maps that are bigger than that. One technique is to create texture maps that are bigger than that, and then downsample them to 1024 by 1024, and that generally has the effect of anti-aliasing. You can do that in the texture map itself, and then you don't have to have SketchUp perform this calculation, which slows down the graphical performance. So there you have it, lots of tips for modeling more efficiently with your existing hardware.